how to use recruitment to improve employee engagement and outside sources of candidates, and how to recruit more diverse workforce and all that kind of stuff. So this is very, very useful day for all of you, not just from the perspective of being a manager or HR professional, but also from the perspective of looking for jobs and understanding how recruitment works. So we can talk about a little bit of those kinds of things, what works, what doesn't work out there in recruitment, and I can share some of my personal opinions on those and some of new trends and things that are happening out there. It's kind of a mess, to be honest with you. I mean, there's some pros and cons and good things out there, but internet has changed the way we recruit people, and while in one hand it's a very good thing, on another hand it's not so good thing. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But this is kind of like how the process sort of goes. Obviously, in terms of filling the positions that you have to fill, you have to do some planning and forecasting. Because the thing about it is that if you wait till the last minute when you need new employees, it's already too late. So you have to, often 3 months to 6 months in advance, you have to start anticipating your labor needs, and then start the recruitment process, because an average time for job hunt or recruitment is somewhere around 6 months, 7 months. So obviously there are people who find a job in a couple of months, and there are organizations who fill jobs in a couple of months, but very, very often it may take half a year. And organizations may have failed searches when they decide on one candidate, they offer the job, and the person doesn't accept the job, then they have to kind of start again or go to the next candidate, and so forth and so on. So there are all kinds of different delays that can happen. So recruitment cannot be just a reactive kind of a thing and say, okay, now somebody left or retired, or we had to terminate somebody, so let's now go ahead and fill that position. Many large organizations, they recruit pretty much ongoingly all the time. So they are constantly building a pool of candidates, and they may or may not need them at that given time, but they have a pipeline all the time. So they accept applicants completing application forms, and then when it's time to start moving forward, they use a variety of different selections tools like test and screen out most applicants. Sometimes it's just a phone call, a few standardized questions that is used to screen out. Sometimes there are some computerized kind of a tests that they send a link, and people have to do some sort of a test, or sometimes they have to record a video of themselves. I mean, there are all kinds of different modern ways that companies do it. And part of the reason why they use these automated ways is that it saves manpower in an HR department, so that they can make it as streamlined and automated as possible. And again, that's problematic in some ways, although the intentions are good to save cost and to streamline it, but it also has some problems in the process. And then, of course, after the initial screen, the supervisors and others, whoever is are deemed to be the people in a selection committee or hiring committee, they interview the final candidates and then make the final choice. So really, it's the recruitment process is a selection process is really a series of hurdles, series of hoops that the candidate has to kind of get through. That's why it's important to look at job search that way. So just from your personal perspective, if you're looking for a job, it's important to remember that job search is a process, and you should never really anticipate the outcome, or the best attitude is to detach yourself from the outcome, not to start getting your hopes up and imagining what it would be to be working in that position that you applied for, because of the fact that there are these hurdles in the process, and there are so many factors involved that may have absolutely nothing to do with you as the applicant. So if they end up not hiring you and they end up hiring somebody else, there's just no way of knowing, why. It may have had nothing to do with you at all. It may be that in the last minute there may have been an internal candidate that stepped in, and something that you don't know about. So it's just very important to understand that it is a process. Also, if you are working in an organization, you have to remember always that it is a process, and so you have to be patient. Hiring somebody just because they're the first person in the door applying, that's not a good idea. You have to be patient, and you have to go through your due diligence and go through the right steps, because if you don't, you can make a serious mistake, and then cost of replacing an employee can be $30,000 or more, depending on position. And by more, I mean it can be hundreds of thousands when it's executive level position. So obviously entry level position alone, just the recruitment cost and everything will be about 30,000 just to replace one employee. So you kind of don't want to throw that kind of money around. And so it's important to have some planning in place and forecasting, and use appropriate selection process. Workforce planning, it's a term that is used, and it used to be called personnel planning. Again, these terms change with times, whatever is politically correct at that given time. It's a field of its own. There are lots of people involved in sort of workforce development. A lot of community colleges are involved. They sort of have departments on that really interact with the industry out there, and they purpose is to fill in the slots within certain industries, and so they are cooperating with their manufacturing plants or whatever companies in a particular region to help them to plan for the pipeline of their employees that they need. And so like for example, many hospitals may have arrangements with certain nursing schools and certain medical schools, so they get residents, doctors from certain hospitals. I mean, certain medical schools, and then also nurses. They take interns, and they take nurses from certain particular schools in the region. So the schools, training academies, and institutions, they participate with these hospitals in managing and sort of planning and forecasting the needs. And so it's a kind of a collaborative process. So really, in a nutshell, it is a process of deciding what positions the firm will have, and how to fill them. And again, the important word there is will have. You have to forecast in advance what you will have. So if you are going to be implementing some new strategies that are going to require some new staffing and new people that you have to hire, you really want to be able to forecast that. Now, in some industries, it's very obvious. There are peak seasons. Tourism industry, hospitality industry, there are certain seasons that are peak seasons that you want to ramp up and hire for that. Retail, obviously, right now we are getting to the point of the year where retail really starts accelerating because of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and then Christmas shopping. And so all the department stores and retail establishments, they have to ramp up and have extra personnel. And then January comes and they really don't need them, so they become kind of seasonal workers. Also, obviously, agriculture is very seasonal, so there are seasonal workers that are needed in different harvest times and whatever, and are needed different times of the year. So there are lots of seasonal types of industries and where the planning becomes very important. So obviously, like with everything, there are software solutions and computer tools available to plan and to forecast things. And these are just some examples. They're really hard to see in detail, but it just sort of shows examples like workforce scan, workforce projection model, dashboards when you are managers are able to lock into this workforce planning software, and they're able to, in real life, look at what's going on with the employees. And then, of course, external labor scan that looks at their sort of availability of for different skills and people with different skill sets and training out there in the labor force. And so it's really pretty cool. I mean, obviously, if you are moms and pops, small organization with 10 employees, you would not be needing to use these kind of modelings because, I mean, you just have 10 employees. But imagine if you're an organization of 1,000 or 2,000, people, and there's multiple departments in multiple locations. Pretty soon you are realizing that it's impossible to do the analysis, in pen and paper and manually, and so you're going to have some of these analytical tools to be able to forecast trends and all of that sort of stuff. So it has gotten pretty kind of sophisticated and cool. So it's all, I mentioned this earlier already, all of this, it's called strategic staffing in many contexts, so you always have to strategically anticipate your strategic moves and your need for people at that given time. The worst possible thing would be if something cool happens and you all of a sudden have more business coming to your way, and then you don't have people to meet that demand. That can be very catastrophic. Good example of what could happen is they used to call this. So you all know Oprah and Oprah show. Well, in an Oprah Winter Oprah show, she used to bring like a particular small business in kind of highlighted the small business in her show. She shows a small business, from a community that she wanted to help to popularize, and so she would, bring the owner to the show, and she would kind of introduce what they're doing. So there's an example of a bakery or in Chicago, small moms and pops entrepreneurial new bakery, and they got in the Oprah show, and overnight they demand for their products skyrocketed to the point that they almost collapsed because they could not keep up with their baking all the goods because they didn't have enough bakers and they didn't have enough raw materials and all of that kind of stuff. So the saying is that be careful what you wish for because you may get it. And so if you are wishing for some great things and you have some great strategies in place, well, you got to be prepared to staff up and meet the demand when it happens. And this may sound trivial, but it isn't. I mean, just think of Apple. These days, Apple products are not in as much in demand anymore, relatively speaking, that they used to be. And that's because everybody has an Apple product. So what happens is that when there's a new iPhone, like right now, iPhone 15, they don't fly off the shelves, and people don't line up to be buying them in the same way that they used to once upon a time. But when they used to be more in demand, they many times Apple fell short. They didn't have enough iPhones available, and a lot of people had to pre-order and wait for many months, to get their new phone and whatever. Now they've solved some of those problems to a certain degree, and now they are more prepared because they learned from the past. And also, like I said, the demand has slowed down just because the incremental changes from one model to another are not that big deal. People don't want to necessarily buy a new $1,000 phone every single year, but it used to be more significant, those changes, and so people wanted new phones. But with many products, it's the same way. And then, of course, when you have things like a pandemic happening, and it causes value chain interruptions with cars, obviously during pandemic, it became very problematic because there was a shortage of microprocessors. And so when they couldn't put the processors into vehicles, they would have thousands of cars sitting out there in manufacturing lots waiting for one really small microprocessor, but they couldn't sell them without the processor. So what happens when you have delays like that? Well, now you have people that you have hired, and you can't use them. So there are all kinds of different things that can go wrong, and so it's important to be able to be flexible with that. Four Seasons, they an interesting. They are the way they are able to respond to the different types of fluctuations is that they have a very, very effective transfer system. So if you work for Four Seasons, and maybe in your location there's not as much demand at that given time because it's not a tourist season, they can transfer people from within, from one Four Seasons location to another Four Seasons location around the world. And in that way, by transferring people internally, they're able to really, really help to keep every location staffed properly. And it can be a really, really cool thing for the workers if they are willing to do that, because they get to travel the world and experience different locations. Kind of same thing with like a Hard Rock Cafe. You may notice when you go to Hard Rock Cafe, the waiters and waitresses have these buttons, and these little, they're collecting these what do you call it, the little buttons that they have, to show that they worked in some other locations. So the company makes it easy for people to kind of experience and transfer within the company and travel the world. There are many kinds of forecasting, techniques out there. Obviously, trend analysis. There's various, like I showed you earlier, computer models that are used to take into account multiple different trends, and it's very similar to like Wall Street stock analysis, stock market analysis, in that it's simply an algorithm that calculates different factors, to predict what may happen and may not happen. Ratio analysis, of course, is looking at sort of different ratios of what kind of a pool of qualified candidates you may have in a workforce, and what kind of a ratio of people you need from that pool to apply for the position, and how many of those get interviewed and so forth. So understanding those ratios, and I'll show you a pyramid in a minute, understanding those ratios, how they kind of filter up, gives you an understanding of, like, if I want to fill this particular position, I may need like 1,000 applicants, to apply, and out of those 1,000, I will interview 10, and whatever, but that kind of a thing. Scatterplot is looking for correlations, so you are able to look at correlations in scatterplots of labor demands, and this gets really, really kind of interesting because you would think that bad economic times would be bad for companies, but it turns out that when there is a recession, where there is inflation, and when there is a low kind of a cycle in the economy, it's actually good for the employers, because there are more people looking for jobs, and they're sort of more desperate for jobs because they really need to make some extra money. So what's good for the employees is good for the employers, so to speak, and vice versa. When the economy is good, now all of a sudden there's more jobs out there. It's a good labor market, and the salaries are going up, which means that now your employees are going to start looking for other organizations to move to, because they offer better salaries, and now you have more competition, because now everybody's looking for those workers, because now business is doing well, so they need to be fully staffed, and so now employees have more bargaining power to be able to turn around and say, I need more salary. So that's actually bad for employers. So there's sort of a reversed type of a demand and supply type of a relationship there, and so that's kind of interesting how it happens. And I always remember I was in Chicago in a Greater Chicago Chamber of Commerce annual conference, and Michael Balmer, sorry for the pronunciation, Michael Balmer, the former CEO of Microsoft, that of course was there as the right-hand man when Bill Gates was still in charge, and then after Bill Gates retired, Michael Ballmer took over, and now he owns LA Clippers basketball team, and he's very into sports and doing a lot of different things. There's a Ballmer Foundation up in Seattle that gives a lot of money in a philanthropic purposes. So obviously Michael is not anymore with Microsoft. But anyway, Michael Ballmer was on the stage, and he said to everybody and said that, just think about how many Fortune 500 companies were started and founded during the time of Great Depression. And so it's interesting when you start looking at that. And one would think that where Great Depression was a horrible time for everybody. Well, yeah, but there was actually a lot of business opportunities that got generated, that lots of things kind of occurred during Great Recession or Great Depression, and a lot of companies got started during that time. So it's always kind of interesting how when you start analyzing these labor trends, it's really not as straightforward as kind of one would think. You have to kind of use sort of reversed logic and rational to understand what's good, what's bad. And then, of course, there's managerial judgment. Managers have to make certain decisions. The data doesn't always provide you everything that you need. But we talked about this before, that HR is becoming more and more and more data-driven, because it turns out that managerial judgment is not as great as many managers think that it is. Managers don't have this, ability to really understand the environment anymore. And the reason for that is that the environment changes so rapidly. It maybe didn't change that much in the past. So managers could use their kind of intuition and experience to predict and say, well, in 10 years of my experience as a manager, it's always been cyclical this way and, seasonal. And so we can do this and we can do that. But, world is more chaotic these days and unpredictable. And so managerial judgment in terms of based on experience and intuition, it's really not as accurate anymore. So it's important to supplement that with data. Now, interesting when you start looking at sort of forecasting, you can do these sort of personnel replacement charts. You should always kind of have an idea of saying, well, if you need to replace somebody, who do you have in a pipeline to be able to take over that position? Good managers, good executives from day one are focusing on training their replacement. I mean, that's what good future-oriented managers do. It isn't about how long can I hold on to this position. It's about when I move on to my next role or when I retire, who's going to take over me. And so there should be constant process of training and mentoring your replacement. And for that, you have to kind of do these personal replacement charts. Obviously, kind of want to keep them sort of confidential because many times there's multiple, candidates for these positions. But, you want to provide that kind of training opportunity to, in this case, 3 different people who kind of, you identify what type of training they need, and you identify those as possible people who could take over when you are no longer in the position, and you kind of map their training needs accordingly so that you make sure that they're ready, to compete for that position when needed, if that makes sense. And so also forecasting the supply of outside candidates, like I said earlier, I mean, managers' sense of what's happening, not as easy as one may think, because like I said, things just change a lot. But many times locally managers do have some sense and understanding of where things are. So, here in Alabama, for example, companies are struggling because we have almost in every part of Alabama, there are retiring people are moving in. So where I live over here in coastal Alabama, in the southern part of it, in the coast of Gulf of Mexico, this is very, touristy. It's a very nice place to live because the weather is warm all the time. It's subtropical. So we have 10 to 15 people moving into Baldwin County every single day of the year. It's a huge influx of new people moving in over here from up north, from northeast, and from Texas sometimes, from Midwest, but mostly from northeast because people get tired of cold weather and, cost in New York City and whatever, cost of housing. So they come over here and come to retire down south. Well, at the same time, we are losing working age people all the time. So we're losing about 5 to 6,000 working age people every single year. So we're getting this influx of retirees and older people or people who work somewhere else and come over here to buy a house and they work remotely. By the way, same problem in Hawaii. People are moving to Hawaii who are now working remotely, but they want to have the best of the both worlds, live in an island, but not work in an island because they're working remotely. And so remote work makes that kind of a thing possible. So those are the kinds of examples of things that managers going to have an understanding of what's happening around in the markets. And so if you are in a place like over here down south, you have to understand that your labor pool is shrinking all the time. And so you have to work with proper community colleges and universities to somehow make arrangements to be able to bring in those people and give incentives and do whatever you need to be able to do this proper staffing. And so you use your sense of what's happening with sort of formal labor market analysis to whatever degree you're capable of doing that. Obviously, like I said earlier, smaller companies can't do these sophisticated things, so they have to rely on managers' sense. And then larger companies are increasingly automated on this kind of analysis. Any questions right now? I know I'm talking really fast. Like I say, had a cup of coffee right before this. So any questions?
So, Professor, it's a nice, thanks for sharing. But I'm just thinking that when older people are moving to these warmer states, so why it's concerning to HR or managers that how come the workforce is reducing if people are retiring and they're moving to warmer places?
Well, it's problematic to. It's not problematic to places that people are moving from, other than the fact that those are taxpayers that they buy products, they buy houses, they buy all kinds of different things. So they bring money into the economy. So losing those people, is not great for the states and places where people are moving away from. So of course it's advantageous for Alabama economy. Baldwin County is the one, probably the richest part of Alabama overall.
Okay, so I'm understanding that concern would be towards the states from where they are moving, right? Not to the states they are moving, correct?
Well, so that's what I'm saying is that look at it this way: if we have 10 to 15 people who are retiring over here, well, in order to provide services to those 10 to 15 people a day, we need new restaurants, we need new grocery workers, in grocery stores, we need people building houses, we need people keeping up with maintenance of infrastructure, all of those kinds of things. More people moving into any particular location means that there are more people who have to cater to those people who live there. But if at the same time, when retired folks are moving in, the working age people are moving to big cities away from here, from South, from here, sometimes people go to Birmingham, Alabama, North Alabama, because there are more jobs there. Sometimes people leave to Atlanta. Sometimes people leave to Florida. Florida has become the largest, most populated state after California. Right now, it just became more populated than New York State. So people go where the jobs are. So when I mean, if you are going to college over here in Alabama and you turn around, where you're going to find a job here. And so the problem is there are not enough jobs for people in one hand over here, so people leave. But then on the other hand, there's need for those workers then when they are So it's kind of a complicated type of situation, and you can't blame people. I mean, I'm sure, like my kids, after they go to college, I don't think they have any plans to stay in Alabama. They're probably gonna want to go to some big city and try to look for some, big career. Why in the world would they stay in a rural Alabama? There's no jobs over here. This is a good place to retire, but not good place for career. Mohammed, go ahead.
Yeah, just for a better understanding of the challenge here. So the challenge is that the demand is increasing. There are like more demand for jobs, but the pool the employers will select from is very limited due to the elderly people moving to the city. Is
Yes,
this correct?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, the type of jobs that are needed to cater to retired people would be the kind of jobs like somebody working in grocery stores, somebody working in restaurants, hospitality, those type of things. Well, those are not the jobs that young people want to stay here for. Young people want to get educated. They go to college and they want to get engineering jobs or, you know, manager jobs or whatever it is, high tech or whatever. And, if there's no companies over here, providing those kind of high end jobs and only, offering low end jobs like that, well, there's the same time shortage of people to take care of the increasingly older population, but at the same time, not enough people to fill the higher end, more skilled, positions because they don't exist. So this is happening in many parts of the United States. New York State is a good example of that. Increasingly from upstate New York, people moving down to the city because the city continues, and by city I mean the New York City. New York City continues to offer career opportunities because there's so many corporations out there. So if you're living up in, I don't know, Rochester or Oneonta or Binghamton or something like that, I mean, you look around and say, there's no jobs over here. I gotta have much, much better opportunities for career growth if I go to the big city. Same thing in Illinois. I mean, I used to live in Chicago, and when you leave Chicago proper, or they call it Chicagoland, the Metro Chicago, there's almost nothing, and there's small towns dying outside of Chicago because Chicago is pulling all the power, all the workforce around, and of course, this type of thing has been happening since Industrial Revolution. So this isn't a modern, current thing. It's been happening around the world everywhere. So in these rural places, again, they are good for retirement, but not necessarily good for living. And so we struggle right now over here. I mean, there's nice houses here. There's, beautiful weather, right next to beaches. A lot of people come here to retire, and they often have quite a bit money to retire. But, you want to hire a plumber or, somebody to cut your grass, and it costs enormous amount of money because there's shortage of people doing those kind of jobs that retired people can't cut their own grass, in a summer heat of 100 and some degrees. So they have to hire somebody to do it. Well, those who are willing to do it, there's shortage of those kinds of people. So now everything becomes more expensive over here, if that makes sense. So it's always kind of an interesting type of dance that in one hand you may have demand for the young people. You want them to start their careers here. You want them to do some entry level jobs while they are building their career. But if they go to college elsewhere and they leave before they even take those summer jobs or whatever, it becomes problematic. And so those are just some examples of type of complicated dynamics that may be happening. So that's why big corporations, they move their facilities, their plants, their factories to wherever they can find affordable labor. And so we talk about outsourcing a little bit more, but the whole point of globalization is that in one hand, you are expanding your markets. So there's a globalization of markets. You're expanding, selling your products internationally around the world. But on the other hand, there's also globalization of production. When your labor force would be too expensive in the United States, you go to different parts of the world. India has become place where a lot of companies are outsourcing. Obviously, Bangladesh is where most garment, fashion, clothing manufacturing is in Bangladesh. So Philippines, a lot of factories there. China, of course, all the semiconductors and computer components are being, built and produced and manufactured in China. And so just because labor is cheaper. And so it's a very complicated type of a thing, between all of these factors. Succession planning is, mentioned that earlier, for leaders. Good leaders plan for their replacement from day one. It can be very, very problematic when you have an influential leader, somebody who's been at the organization a long time, leaves and there's no good succession for them. When I wrote my dissertation in 1997, I wrote a case study on Coca-Cola Corporation. And Coca-Cola Corporation has, well, back then had three distinct sort of eras. There was Esa Candler era, they are family when Coca-Cola started as a corner pharmacy, kind of a shop in they obviously Coca-Cola was first sold as a medicine, and so it started in a corner pharmacy, street corner pharmacy in Atlanta, Georgia, and the family that kind of bought that, was called Candler's family. Esa Candler was the first CEO and sort of started first time selling Coca-Cola as a beverage. And back in those days, it did have a lot of cocaine in it. It also had a lot of caffeine in it because they used the original cola nut, although the Coca-Cola company will refuse to admit that it had cocaine, but it certainly did back in those days. So they started selling this very, powerful energy drink, so to speak, back in the day. And they were family-run company, and they started growing. And then, at certain point, they grew to the point that Esa Candler retired, and they hired Robert Woodruff. And for 40 years, Robert Woodruff was CEO and leader of Coca-Cola. And it was a completely different climate, and Woodruff really made Coca-Cola into the global powerhouse that they are right now. And so after Robert Woodruff, there was a big competition for who is going to be the next CEO. And to everybody's surprise, Robert Woodruff selected Roberto Coisuera, this Cuban immigrant who had worked as a chemist in Coca-Cola's facilities in Florida originally. And he was promoted to be the CEO, which was a surprise to everybody. And turned out that Coisuera did really, really well and completely modernized Coca-Cola, because at that time they had kind of started slacking a little bit, become kind of slow and everything. So it's interesting how the succession planning is just really, really important, especially when you are talking about CEO level roles. So effective recruiting is just really important. And one way that we improve recruitment effectiveness is that you train and use effective recruiters, industry specific, recruiters who know where to go find candidates. They understand these labor market fluctuations. They understand how to go about doing it. That's one way that you can improve your effectiveness. Other way would be to identify the best sources. How do you get your people to apply? I mean, do you put ads on a newspaper? Well, not anymore. Nobody reads newspapers. Do you go to job fairs or trade shows? Well, yes, to somewhat. Do you go and hire from colleges, which, by the way, less and less companies are doing, because college recruits don't stay more than 1 year before they move into a next opportunity. So many companies are uneasy about hiring graduates straight from college these days. So you have to analyze the kind of sources. Where do you get the best possible employees? it turns out, interestingly, that best source of candidates for new jobs is existing employee referrals. In other words, you go to your employees, your current employees, and you say, do you have anybody you can recommend? And when they bring the recommendations, those are the best candidates, best employees, new employees in terms of performance and how long they stay with the company. And the reason for that is very simple. If you're going to recommend somebody, you don't want to recommend somebody that wouldn't be good, because you don't want your reputation to be ruined. And if you are the person who is the new employee that gets recommended by somebody, if you care about your friend, you don't want them to look like a fool, so you're going to try to perform as well as possible. So there's very simple psychological reason why that often works. Now, it may sound like nepotism, hire my friend. No, it's not. If that person is a good candidate, then they go through the interview process and against other applicants, and there's nothing wrong with identifying that those hires then end up being the best performing employees. It's only nepotism when you hire somebody who doesn't have the qualifications just because somebody is related to somebody. And so I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about existing employees referring qualified candidates who earn the job through interview process. And then, of course, branding. People want to work for companies that have a great brand. Not, it's interesting when you look at Apple or Google or Amazon or something. These are companies with great brand and great reputation. They don't pay the best. They're not necessarily the best places to work for, but people want to work for those companies because their brand is great. And if you work for one of those companies, you put that in your resume, there's a belief that that's going to help you with your career. So companies have to do branding and make sure that they are seen by potential workers as a good place to work. And everybody knows that Google is a good place to work, and of course they use it for the advantage left and right, to be able to recruit the best of the best. So this is the recruiting yield pyramid that I mentioned earlier. So in order to hire 50 new hires, new employees, you have to have 1,200 leads generated, for that particular position. Now, this is just an example. The yield rates, the ratios, you do ratio analysis, can be different for any particular job. But that's what you need to understand. In order to hire 50 people, you need to have 1,200 leads. And then out of those leads, 200 candidates are, invited. And typically, just because you invite them doesn't mean everybody says, yes, I'm going to interview. So you wind up with 150 people who you interview, and then you make 100 offers because half of them don't take the offer because they go somewhere else and they have multiple offers. So you have to understand your yield pyramid for every position so that you know how hard you're going to go look for those leads and prospects in the front end. Well, we are, I got a 15-minute warning a little while ago, so we are probably pretty close to a break time out there. So before we get shut off like last time, do you have any questions at this point before we take a 15-minute break? Okay, well, if you don't have any questions, let's take a break and come 5 minutes after, whatever time it is for you. So we're taking a break just a little early, but like I said, I don't want to get cut off by surprise because and so let's get a coffee break and come back in 5 minutes after. And by the way, remember to use the next link for this that I posted for the after break link. Welcome back, everybody. Let's get started right away. There's few people probably just still coming in, but that's all right. We talked about this earlier when we talked about employment law. But really, when you're doing recruitment, you have to really be looking at making sure that you don't use methods or sources of recruitment that would intentionally limit or block or make it difficult for certain qualified applicants that want to apply for the job. So if you see, there is some kind of rules of thumb. People these days kind of know that if you see a job in a local newspaper, you probably know that that job is already promised to some internal candidate, or that company isn't really serious about recruiting for that job. And the reason for that is that everybody knows that people don't read newspapers anymore, but there is a requirement that jobs have to be posted, and made, equal employment opportunity, so that you are posting it somewhere publicly in order to meet the legal requirement. But in reality, by posting the job in a local newspaper, that you are not really looking for candidates really, really hard, because people don't read newspaper. So it's pretty much of an indication that it's useless to apply for the job, because they probably have already promised it to somebody, but they just have to go through the process. And by the way, same thing with sort of LinkedIn. We'll talk about LinkedIn a little bit, but social media recruitment has become so inexpensive that they post a lot of jobs out there that really are not real jobs. Well, first of all, there's a lot of franchise sellers out there. There are a lot of helping you to start your own business type of things, and there's also a significant amount of fraud. There are people who impersonate companies, and they try to get your personal information or even money out of you. And so they are kind of going after people who are desperate for jobs, and they get their hopes up, and they may pay for a training program or pay for equipment or something like that. So and they are able to do that in LinkedIn, because posting a job is often first job free. So they use that free job posting in order to get candidates that they just try to cheat money out of them. And when companies have to use more expensive means of recruiting people, of course, that's less likely to be used by fraudsters, scammers, because they don't want to spend that kind of money. At the same time, if you are hiring people internet only, let's just say that you're only posting a job on internet job board. Well, now you're only recruiting people who have internet connection and computer. Now, these days, it's not so much of an issue, because virtually everybody has a computer or mobile phone or something that they can access internet. But, just 10 years ago, for example, lots of people didn't. And so by choosing to use that kind of method or source of recruitment, you literally, intentionally, in many cases, exclude certain populations. And that can become discriminatory and obviously not right. And we also have to remember that different populations use different kinds of sources. They go to different kind of websites. They read different kind of newspapers and magazines. They, go to different networking events. And so you have to be mindful of that as well. If you want to attract diverse employees, you have to use diverse ways of recruiting them. Now, obviously, it would sound like a good idea to hire internal candidates. Like I mentioned, 4 seasons, they use internal transfers. That's their way of being able to be strategic. But it also offers that career opportunity, offers that opportunity for the internal candidates to have some job rotation, some global experiences, different locations. So it's all great. So it seems like internal sources of candidates using internal recruitment sources would be attractive. But you got to be somewhat careful about it. Number one, you got to think about how you're going to find your internal candidates. So that you don't just post in a bulletin board in a one department and that excludes all the other departments. So you do have to make sure that you are communicating within your organization that job posting to literally everybody and not just a selective department or selective places. So in the same way, when you're hiring outside people, when you have to think about your methods and sources, you also have to think about it when you're hiring internal candidates. Obviously, you're tapping into current employees when you are hiring internally, but that's exactly the problem, because you're tapping into your current employees. By hiring a current employee, you are also creating a new vacancy. So every time you hire an internal candidate, that candidate is leaving their former job, and now you have to hire somebody for that former job. So that's the irony of using internal candidates, that in one hand, you of course you may increase morale and job satisfaction and engagement and keep people in your organization that way when you give them these career opportunities, ladder opportunities. But on the other hand, like I said, you always create a new vacancy. And also, when you don't bring quote unquote new blood in to the organization, you don't bring any new skill sets, new knowledge, new cultural attitudes, all of that stuff. So always hiring from within, the gene pool gets pretty shallow, so to speak. And so if there's any negative cultural type of customs or habits or behaviors, they tend to be magnified. If there are people who are venting a lot and they tell old stories about how the organization does this and that and not so great or whatever, those things also get magnified when you're hiring only from inside. When you bring in new people in from outside, you're bringing new ideas, new energy, and you're changing the organization. So it's not always good to hire from within, although it seems from the onset like that's a great idea. And like I said, the job posting has to be also then made available externally often. There are sometimes companies say internal candidates only. It's very questionable, at least in my opinion, whether that's legally defendable to be saying, internal candidates only or whatever. And I've seen all kinds of different postings, especially lately. I mean, they will say, hiring men only, women only, or, hiring from certain location only, internal candidates only. Just because you find job announcements like that doesn't mean that it's legal. They're just small companies who don't know any better. And by the way, because of small companies, if they have 20 or less employees, they do not have to comply with affirmative action. So they can make choices that would not be okay in larger organization. I mean, just think about it. When you go to any Chinatown of any major city in the United States, how do Chinese restaurants get away with only hiring Chinese people? Well, they have less than 20 employees, so they don't have to be concerned about that. And then there is less than 30 employees. There's certain regulations that apply to certain size organizations. So generally, when you start getting like more than 50 employees, that's when most of your labor employment laws start really impacting you, and you start gonna have to start looking at things legally a little bit differently. It is important when you are looking at hiring internal that have qualification skill inventory. In other words, they talk about human capital. You have to understand what your human capital is in order to be able to say, look, this person has qualifications for this position or that position. People may have skills and training and education in areas that they are not currently utilizing in that job that they are in. So if and you use these skills inventories, then you always have an understanding of what your human capital in your organization, is, what people are capable of doing. So yeah, that's important. Like for example, I just given an example of myself. I teach a business management human resource course here, but I could, if my university that I work for would take a look at my transcript and resume, they could also find that I can teach psychology, I can teach instructional design because I have a master's degree in instructional design. And so it's just an example. Could be used to teach many, many other courses and not just this. I'm not referring to this university, and I'm not trying to, make a statement at all here. I'm just simply using as an example that it's important to, in my industry, in higher education, when I manage faculty members, it's important for me to understand their transcripts and their backgrounds so that I can understand all kinds of different courses and disciplines that they can teach, so that I don't have to go out there and recruit those people for those disciplines separately, because I may have people already on board who can do it. So that's an example of human capital management and understanding what your people are capable of doing. So some companies have really, really excelled in promotion from within, and they have branded that in a way that people looking to go into those organizations, that may be part of the reason why they go to work for those organizations, is because they know that there are good career ladder opportunities. FedEx is known to be one of those companies. They have a very, very intentional promotion from within policy, and they do a lot of practices, and they focus on that to identifying candidates from inside of the organization. And so that attracts a lot of people. They may say, hey, I'll take a job at FedEx rather than UPS or something like that, because I'm able to move up in my job. So they have used that reputation for their advantage. So as I mentioned earlier, that you can always get employees they need, you need from your current staff. And sometimes you can't, because, you're introducing a new product line, new type of service, and you just don't have the people who are familiar with that new product line. So you have to bring people from outside. Using the higher education example, if I'm a business dean and I choose to start a sports management major or degree program, and I don't have any sports management people, I only have sort of regular business people and general management people, but not from sports industry, then I'm going to have to turn around and hire those kind of faculty members who have sports specific experience, just as an example. And so sometimes you just can't. And like I said earlier, sometimes you just don't want to. You may want the new ideas and new creativity, and so therefore you just don't want to hire internal candidates. And so that's important to understand why. There are also many jobs are informal. There's, according to some estimations, I don't remember the statistics, but something like 40% that I read somewhere of new jobs are created for that individual. So what happens is that you go to a networking event, you talk to somebody who is a hiring manager, and they get really impressed with what you have to offer. And they're like, hey, I think we really need you in this organization, and you would be a valuable asset on long term for our organization. So I'm going to turn around and I'm going to create a position just to hire you. And so that type of thing happens. And then there are a lot of job openings that aren't publicized at all. There are sort of promotion opportunities from within that somebody creates, and they don't go outside to advertise it. Now, legally, you could argue that they should, but what are the chances of getting caught? So the point is that there are lots of job openings that aren't publicized at all. Their hiring managers use their own networks to bring in people. I can't tell you how many times I have hired faculty. Again, I keep talking about higher education because that's where I've worked in my entire career. And so when I've been a provost or vice president of academic affairs and I've had to hire faculty, can't tell you how many times I have never published a position. I've used my own network and contacted people that I have worked with in the past, and I knew their reputation, I knew their quality of work, I knew that they, I would be able to get them on board quick and train them fast. So I just went and hired faculty that way. And that type of thing, there's nothing wrong with it. People do that all the time. Of course, when you're in a higher kind of a level leadership jobs or something like that, sometimes, you want to be careful that you don't, do that kind of a not publishing and hiring from within or using your network entirely. But again, it's just a reality. That's what happens in the world. Jobs are created and become available when you find the right candidates. Many organizations do not hire to fill jobs. They hire to find the right caliber people. And, if you find somebody and you bump into somebody in a networking event, or you get introduced to somebody who's just worth that much, and you have a strategic mindset that you may be doing something that we need that person later on, you want to grab them before they go and work for somebody else. So I mentioned also earlier recruiting via the internet. I have sort of mixed feelings about this because in one hand, obviously, it's very convenient. But because it's convenient, it also creates lots of applicants. And so now HR staff, professionals, they're extra busy going through applications that sometimes may not even be legit or may not even be qualified applicants, because it's easy for somebody to apply from the comfort of their home. They don't have to go and fill up an application, go in an HR department and do it the kind of difficult way. It attracts a lot of people to just give it a shot, even though they know that they're not qualified. In a matter of fact, a lot of these workshops or guides that you read about how to apply for jobs encourage people to apply for jobs that you are not even qualified for, because they may see something in your resume and they may change the qualifications just because you have something that they want. So not meeting the minimum qualifications isn't even always a problem, but it is a problem when you have too much work for your HR people, and so you're not capable of going through all of the applications. So, for example, when you apply jobs at LinkedIn, and let's just say you apply 100 jobs at LinkedIn, and then you go to LinkedIn to look at my jobs and your applied jobs, and it shows you how many of those 100 jobs they even opened your application, that they even downloaded your resume. And you find that maybe those 100 jobs, only 10 of them, because of the quantity of applicants that they are receiving, didn't even have a chance to even get to your application. So here are you thinking that you applied for the job. In reality, you didn't apply for the job. Well, I mean, you did, but they didn't look at your application. And sometimes they say that the life expectancy of a resume is about 5 seconds. I mean, that's about the time that somebody holds it in their hand and they see what they want to see before they toss it. So if there isn't something in 5 seconds in your resume that grabs their attention, you ain't getting the job. So internet job boards, Monster Jobs, whatever. I mean, the many of these job boards. I don't remember anymore all of the names of them. Obviously, Indeed is one. Ladders is another one. Like I said, Monster Jobs is one. So many of these, they use algorithms. They use word recognition. So when you submit a resume, they're not scanning human beings. They're not scanning actual people. They're scanning resumes. They're scanning words in your resume. So what if you are a dynamic, great employee and great candidate, but you just didn't put the right words in the resume? Now you never get the chance because the machine is just reading words. Meanwhile, somebody who is not as great candidate and really doesn't have the skill set that you have, they paid somebody, a certified resume writer, to cook up their resume, where they use fancy words like, I don't know. I mean, janitor would be called, or homemaker would be called domestic engineer or something like that. I mean, they use fancy words, fancy titles to make themselves look better. And again, that's what many guides and training programs, teach people to do. And so it's more of a competition of who writes the fancier resume than it is a really fair competition of candidates. So that's my problem with these internet sites, that it doesn't really show the authentic human beings, and it becomes more about theatrics and wordplay, rather than actual human beings. Virtual job fairs can be okay, but if you ever been in a job fair anyway, in a physical job fair, there can be lots of people there, and it's very, very easy to get lost in a crowd and not get that opportunity. Well, can you imagine when people can attend those virtual job fairs from everywhere? So the pure magnitude of how many people you have in those job fairs sometimes makes it a little bit of a difficult to even get noticed. So again, recruitment via internet does have its pros and cons. It's inexpensive, it's convenient, you're able to reach geographically larger population and audience of people, but then you also get too many people, all of that. So it has pros and cons. Now, these days, things have gotten even more interesting because now, well, first of all, almost everybody uses ATS. So there's some sort of applicant tracking system, and there's many people, so Oracle, there's all kinds of different companies that Workday is one popular one these days. I mean, there's a lot of companies that built these ATS, applicant tracking systems. And so these are the systems when you go apply for a job, and you have to build your you have to create your login and password, and then you put in your profile, and then you upload your resume, and your resume then populates the different fields. And that's when you have to think about making your resume ATS ready, so that it's works with those ATS systems well. And that becomes difficult if you have a complex resume. It always doesn't read right, so it creates, again, resume writing complications. But these, they are online systems from these application service providers, ASPs, that just help companies to process the applications. It's great when they are good and they work. It's not so great when they don't work. And many times, I mean, I can't tell you how many applications I filled, and there's no choice for the right type of a thing. So, for example, I have my doctorate degree is Doctor of Management. Well, Doctor of Management is a little bit more unusual degree. It's an applied degree versus PhD being a research degree. So it's equal in terms of a doctorate credential terminal degree. It's kind of like you can have PhD in medicine to do medical research, or you can have MD, which is a doctor of medicine that treats people. It's the same idea. Doctor in management is an executive training consulting degree intended for real practice, and PhD management is research universities, researchers do research. Anyway, my point is this, that sometimes you go to ATS and there's a drop-down menu that gives you a selection of degrees. And now you can't find the degree that you have in there. So now you are forced to choose PhD because that's all it gives you, possibility. Well, now technically you lied in your application because you identified a degree that isn't, I mean, maybe you have doctorate in education, maybe you have doctorate in medicine, So anyway, so those are kind of examples that, like I said, just what I can relate to, because that's what I see. Now, where this gets even funkier is when you have artificial intelligence systems that are doing automated resume analysis. I mean, you can. This is an evolving kind of a field, so we don't even really know how problematic it really is yet. I can certainly see already some of the job sites. I don't know what the AI system is thinking. If I put my resume in there for some job sites, it sends me job leads in engineering or something like that. Like, how in the world did it get engineering? And I have one single word referring to engineering in my resume. So what I've noticed and heard from people is that those AI-based algorithms are just sort of wacky, and they just kind of get information from wherever. There's really no human interface there to kind of look at it. And so when everything is automated, computers make mistakes, and so there's a lot of bias. Again, it's all based on word recognition and a combination of words, and however the AI is reading it. And so it could very, very easily become biased and even discriminatory. I mean, you can't tell AI not to be discriminatory because AI doesn't have morals. AI just does what it's programmed to do, and so it's obviously very problematic. And you can only, I mean, if you want to be a futurist, what those people who think about what happens in the future, you can just start thinking of Terminator Judgment Day scenarios of how AI can hire the wrong people and what can go wrong and everything. So I mean, a lot of experts have warned us about AI, not just in HR, in everywhere in the world, how computers can make wrong decisions for humanity. And I think this is one place where it can go wrong. Now, some organizations are really, really sophisticated in this stuff. Google is one example of that. They have this people operations, the HR department, where they essentially have their own internal recruitment agency in Google. And they are always in a hunt for good people. They're always looking for them. Their recruiters are always working, trying to find the best and the best talent. And so they have gotten it very, very sophisticated. That's so they're good example of like using science in talent management. One thing that is important about recruiting for jobs is to write kind of online ads. So if you are going to post a job on online portals or social media, this is an example how you ineffective ad would be kind of just, here is the job, here's the salary, here is this and that. And, very, very, I mean, it doesn't look attractive, doesn't, look appealing at all. It just seems like, okay, whatever. You want it to tell a story. You want it to show character and personality of your company. Recently, I looked at the job application or announcement from Huron Consulting Group, and I was super impressed. They really, really, really made the company look like fun and attractive, and the values, they really communicated them well in that particular job announcement. So some companies do a really, really good job, and then you have some other companies who do not really do a good job. And so how do you expect people to apply for the job if you don't tell them what the job is about, and if you don't tell what you are looking for and whatever? So it's important that use proper language, make it attractive, make it read well, all of that type of stuff. LinkedIn, we talked about LinkedIn. Yeah, I mean, there's Accenture estimates that 80% of the jobs are going to be found through social media in the near future. I don't know if that's true or not, but LinkedIn is certainly really, really fast become a very dominant way that people find jobs. And like I said, it's problematic. Number one, LinkedIn search functionality is very poor. It does not do a good job in finding the right industry and right kind of jobs. And so that's bad. So you end up applying for jobs that you really don't kind of qualify for because the algorithm gives you recommends those jobs. And so you think that, hey, look, I mean, if LinkedIn is recommending this job and is matching your skills or something like that, you're like, okay, I gotta be applying for this job. No, not so fast. It's an AI algorithm telling you that something matches somewhere, but you start reading it and say, look, you have no expertise in that whatsoever. So it doesn't do a good job in that, number one. Two, like I said earlier, because it's inexpensive for companies to post jobs, they post all kinds of stuff out there. It's easy to post jobs that already have been given to somebody in reality, but you have to just make them public. So you post them for free in LinkedIn. So you're not really serious of hiring company. It's very, very easy for startup companies to be pushing jobs that are not really jobs. You're asking people to work for sweat equity, to be entrepreneurs and, work for free, in exchange of some shares that may or may never materialize. You want to sell some franchises. A lot of jobs in LinkedIn are actually somebody selling a franchise. Would you like to be your own boss? Would you like to make this amazing amount of money working from home? Well, give me $5,000 to buy this franchise. I'm just saying, many times they are much more than 5,000. But I mean, they're actually selling a service. They're selling a franchise rather than actually offering a job. And then you have a lot of nonprofit organizations looking for board members. And that's great. I mean, if you are looking to serve as a board member, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's a sub search engine. And so that's the problem with social media, that everything goes. And so, yes, LinkedIn is becoming popular. Recruiters go to look at Twitter, they look at Facebook and everything, which also creates a situation where all of us have to be super, super mindful of what we post on social media, because you don't want employers to see something that you just expressed a political opinion or religious opinion, or posted some pictures of you partying on a Friday night or something like that, or something tasteless or wacky or something like that. We may not think at the time, we think, hey, this is a funny joke, and we post something. But look, I mean, if an employer sees that joke that you thought that was funny at the time, and they think that that's tasteless, you're not getting the job. So the first place that any employer is going to go when they screen you, they're going to look for your Facebook profile if they can access it. So be careful what you put in LinkedIn. Remember that you are selling a brand. You don't have to be social media influencer to understand that you are selling a brand when you are posting something in Facebook. So everything you put out there is developing your brand. And it's not just human beings that are looking at your brand, it's those AI engines. So artificial intelligence is picking up those things, and it creates a profile based on what it finds posted on internet. So think about it. What kind of profile do you wanna create? What kind of image do you want to create by posting certain things? So not so fast. Gotta be careful with LinkedIn. But at the same time, if you're looking for a job, would you go to LinkedIn? Absolutely. Would it help to pay 40, $50 a month to do a premier account? Probably. Then you can do your analytics and you can understand who is looking at you, and you can get recommendations for premier jobs and whatever. So yeah, LinkedIn is doing well because they have a good business model. And for now, at least, they are dominant in this particular space. It's another example of like whether you go to LinkedIn or whether you go, anywhere else. When you're using media to apply for jobs, you need to make sure that you are writing the ad and constructing the ad in kind of an attractive way, and not just the text, but also the whole feel of it. Logos and everything like that. There's so many different ways. If you really want to attract the best of the best people, you need to look at it like you are really advertising it. And I don't know if this example is the best, other than the fact that you can see there's a catch line. Are you our next key player? That catch sees right away. We really want you. Come to apply. It's almost like, military recruitment, looking for a few good men and women. And then you have a logo in there and, contact information with large and bold. So those types of things, are important. If you really want a good candidate, then work on it. I mean, don't just, do some small print somewhere and expect people to reply. Make it flashy, make it attractive, tell a story, show your personality, your company personality and culture. So that's important. Now, there's also employment agencies that you can use. So there's public agencies, the state governments, federal governments have some departments that help people to find jobs. And so that's, if you're unemployed, you go out there and, sign up with these public agencies, and they may able to help you. Now, in more educated, higher level jobs, they can't do anything for you. These are more entry level labor jobs that government agencies can find you for you. But I mean, they're there for people to take advantage. Then there are some nonprofit agencies who are particularly wanting to help the unemployed, and that's part of their mission. They may cater to certain groups, certain nationalities, or certain race, or certain underprivileged entity, and they are trying to help that particular group, and that's a good thing, because there's a need. I'm a board member of Project Roadmap, Community Center for Educational Resources, and we provide educational pathways and try to create more economic mobility for minority Black children, specifically. And I just feel like it's important, because my children are interracial. I'm married to a Black woman, so I feel personal, kind of feel like it's something that is responsibility or obligation for me to try to help those who would otherwise not have those opportunities. And so there's nonprofit agencies like that who make that possible. And then of course you have private employment agencies, recruitment firms, at many different kinds, many different levels, from temporary agencies to executive search firms that can help to find jobs. And so they're kind of different types. You have recruiting process outsourcers, and so they don't necessarily kind of go very aggressively and recruit for you. They just provide that process. If you don't have the HR department and the people to kind of do it for you, all you have to do there is hire these people, and they kind of facilitate the process. ATS may be part of it, but they may actually do some phone calls, they connecting and do the background checks and all of those kinds of things. And then you have on-demand recruiting services, where you really want to hire for a specific job and it's competitive, and you need to really hire somebody who's a real expert in it. And that's when you hire these on-demand recruiting services. They are expensive. They know the industry, they know their field, and they go, they make phone calls, they search, and they try to find the best of the best candidates, no matter where they are. I get tons of those emails all the time from recruitment agencies saying, would you like to apply for this vice president of academic affairs job, or this and that in this and this university? Because I've been in higher education field so long that these recruiters are familiar, and they're trying to encourage me to apply. It's not a bad thing. Sometimes I do, but that's what these recruiters do for a living. Temporary workers are kind of a trendy, maybe, they are in some ways beneficial and important part, and so not just being a trendy thing to do, but there's some problems with that as well. So obviously when you need alternative staffing, seasonal, like I mentioned earlier, you need to hire some Christmas retailers, workers. You go to temp agency and you hire some, people for 1 month, and they don't become your formal employees. They're just temp agency. They work for the temp agency, but they're contracted to work for you for that month. There may be a good reason for using those kinds of firms and those agencies to do that. Of course, the problem is that they don't have any commitment to your particular organization. They're transient. Their commitment is for the temp agency. Now, they may be there to look for a permanent job, and so they figure that temp agency is a bridge to get a permanent job. And sometimes it is, because you get to kind of try out the employee, but many times the employer has no intention of hiring permanently. They just want to get some temporary workers. And then, like I said, the commitment of it. And then if you have any proprietary information, any confidential information in your organization, and almost every organization has, when you hire a temp worker, you are giving access to that confidential information to somebody who's going to leave your organization in a couple of months. And then also, if your temporary jobs require some training, you're going to be training people just so that they can leave in a couple of months. So there's all kinds of problems with temp workers. So obviously, the kind of jobs that are more temporary worker specific or qualify for it or work for it are type of entry level secretarial, filing clerks, type of things that doesn't require any really training. You just plug a body in, person in, and say, okay, you do this, and we pay you $10 an hour, $15 an hour minimum wages or something like that. And so it's hard to hire temporary workers to higher level position. When you do hire temporary workers or whatever, and sometimes this is becoming trendy, by the way, many companies, and this is in LinkedIn, many of the jobs are actually 1099. They are contract job offers, temporary, type of a contract, almost consulting arrangement. Those become tricky because just because you call somebody a contractor, if you treat them like an employee, they can turn around and take you to court, and they can say, look, you didn't provide benefits and you were just trying to get away with, using the person as a contractor rather than, actually a salaried employee. If you really are treating them like a contractor, you can't supervise a contractor. They are independent agents, so you're not technically supervising them. You are hiring their services like a consultant. You also cannot provide them a company credit card or company equipment. So if they need a laptop or computer, they need to go and buy their own. You cannot supply it, because that would be perceived as an act of treating them as an employee rather than a contractor. So that's something that employers have to be very careful if they hire contractors. Poaching, that happens a lot. These recruiters poach all the time. Like I said, those recruiters that contact me, they particularly contact me when I'm already in a, sort of a provost job or something like that. That's when they want me to, apply for some other provost jobs. So what these recruiters do is that they go through university website and they poach them, and they try to contact their leaders and encourage them to hire some, to apply for some other universities. Again, I'm using higher education example because that's my industry, but you can, understand that every industry, same thing. If you are in demand, engineers get poached all the time. Recruiters come look for you. That can be a source of good recruits, yeah, but it can be problematic because you can get sued. Like Uber got sued for 245 million for poaching Google's employees when Google had their own rideshare system, and Uber, tried to go and entice those people to, to work for Uber instead, and so a little expensive. We have 15 minutes left, so this is a topic that would take another hour to talk about, because it's a big topic. Globalization is here to stay. I don't have to tell that to you. You guys are, international audience. I guess explained earlier that outsourcing, happens in all industries. You have multinational corporations that really don't even have a home country anymore. They operate globally. They go with any particular function and operation to whatever country and whatever part of the world that serves them the best. So if they need engineers, they set up shop in Scandinavia, where there are a lot of engineers. Nokia headquarters were in Finland, Helsinki, Finland, still are. Well, they still have the headquarters there because there's highly trained engineers. But do they, or did they, when they were the world's largest mobile phone maker, did they produce the phones, manufacture them in Finland? Well, of course not. They were manufactured in China. And then when they trained their employees, they trained them in San Diego, because they have the best training facilities and capabilities there. So, they go wherever they can find the best resources. So, outside vendors, supply, services. So, that's, so you offshore or you outsource to other companies. So it's not even within your own companies. Literally, you hire another company in another country to provide that service for you, and you create your supply chain that way. So that happens a lot, and it's not just blue collar jobs that get offshored. By the way, like I said, engineers. You go. Think about it. in United States, we have 10 lawyers for every engineer. In Japan, you have 10 engineers for every lawyer. So if you're going to look for engineers, you're going to go to Japan or Finland, which is considered, I'm just saying, because I'm from Finland, I'm familiar with Scandinavia, and I'm familiar with the fact that engineering is really something that is emphasized in school system, STEM careers. And so, that's where you go to look for them. And then if you want to look for cheap labor, you go to places like India. India is good because you have English-speaking population and you have huge population, and they are willing to work for wages that would be unimaginable in United States, and they are willing to tolerate working conditions that would be illegal in United States. Now, is that ethical? No. And that's where the issues with globalization is, are you going to take advantage of poor working conditions and poor wages somewhere else? Well, yes. And social responsibility and ethical issues become problematic in those, but it doesn't stop these companies from doing it, and that's unfortunately what happens. Executive recruiters are particular kind of a branch people, working with those recruiters. Like I just said, I get executive recruiters reaching out to me a lot. I have had some bad experience of working with these recruiters because they try to be the middleman, they try to enter into salary negotiations, and they try to influence, and they throw their biases in and everything. So it's problematic, from job candidates' perspective, because you can have a recruiter who gets really hyped up about, oh yeah, you're a great candidate, and they really support you, but you're not talking to the actual employer yet. So they may disagree, and so you may waste a lot of time. On the other hand, from companies' perspective, these recruiters are very expensive. So you can spend 300,000 on recruiting a new president or vice president or something like that, and many cases really not getting quality candidates because there's a poached people from somewhere else. And so what happens is that if somebody poaches you, they attract you with some sort of promising nice offer, but you weren't really in the market in the first place, so you really didn't want the new job, but you got talked into it, which means that you were not really, that wasn't often really the best possible move. And many times those people, they realized that later on and said, I didn't really want to change a career anyway or change a job anyway, but somebody just put a carrot in front of me. So there's some problems. And then of course what happens is that if a company hires an external search agent, recruitment firm, executive recruitment firm, now they are not going to hire an internal candidate, even if that internal candidate would be highly qualified, because they're paying a lot of money to this external recruitment firm. And of course, the external recruitment firm is not going to get their commission if they go and turn around and hire an internal candidate, unless they have some arrangement or some agreement, that they can also recruit internally. But in many cases, it shuts the door for internal candidates, and so that's not good. There are lots of recruiting 101s that we could talk about here, best practices and whatever. I think we talked about a lot of them. Think about the sources, think about the methods, think about the right mix of in-house, out-house, outside or inside recruits. Think about the skill set of your recruits. Think about effective use of technology. Think about writing good job announcements. Obviously, your job analysis has to be done well. We talked about that last time. So there's a lot that we could talk about here, but like I said, we have a little bit running out of time. Referrals and walk-ins, take them seriously. Referrals are good for you. Walk-ins mean that somebody is really interested in your job because they're willing to take the trip to walk in, so pay attention. It's so easy to submit a resume through online portal, but if somebody actually comes to knock at your door, they may really want to work for you, and they may be worth taking a look at. On-demand recruiting services, there may be some recruiting services by companies that are able to do that on demand and they have ready people lined up, that may be a good thing to look at. College recruiting, that works, and many companies, obviously, reason why somebody wants to go to Harvard University or Princeton University or Yale or some other Ivy League is because they have established relationship with certain companies, so it's almost a guaranteed job. So that's great, but it's also not great because what happens is, like I said earlier, is that newly graduated graduated students, they have to start paying their student loans back. They are eager to move forward in their career. They are eager to get the first job. So they may take the first job just because it was the first job offered, but that's not really what they want to do for the rest of their life. They just want to get their feet wet, so to speak. So the 1 year retention rates are really low for college graduates. And so more and more companies are steering away from them a little bit. And that's, of course, not good news for college graduates, but it's good to know that that can happen. Internships used to be the way to do it, and that you hire an intern and you get kind of free labor or sometimes a paid internship, and that would be a kind of management trainee program, and you work with the universities to do those interns. It's getting less and less popular for kind of the same reasons that temporary workers don't always work out. I mean, you spend a lot of time and effort in training an intern, and it has to be an educational experience for the intern, and you're not necessarily getting the work out of them like you want. You end up just training them, and so that's not always a good thing. And then military personnel, military works really hard to create opportunities for the military personnel that when they are discharged from military, that they transfer to civilian workplace. Air Force is probably the best of that. Many of the Air Force jobs, they make it look like they prepare you for a, civilian workplace. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Military culture is very different than corporate culture. So, it's not always the same kind of experience. Many people, when they go to military, they go to military intelligence because that translates real well to business intelligence. So that may be the easiest way to get a job in a civilian world. If you are Navy SEAL and, or some Green Beret, and, it's all battle training or something, you probably don't have that many opportunities in the corporations for that. There are ways to cut costs and recruitment costs. Sometimes you cut costs by just using the General Motors, for example. They cut cost for using the same principles of quality control that they use in their manufacturing and screening out vendors. They applied the same techniques and methods to screen out recruits, and so you can use those same skill sets and expertise, and you can cut cost. May or may not work. It depends, on your environment and company. Final topic, we're almost at an end over here, so sorry that I'm talking so fast. It's important to look at recruiting a more diverse workforce. If you don't have diverse workforce, you can't cater to diverse customers. And so if you do not hire women, you are ignoring 50% of human population. Obviously, a lot of talent there. And many times women make not just equal, but sometimes superior hires for a lot of reasons. I could tell you stories. I'm a bit of a feminist, and I've written some articles about this. And there's even some brain studies to indicate that in some cases, women make better managers. It's a long topic. I don't, want to start it right now, but women make great workers. Single parents, there's a lot of single parents there. And if you are able to provide right kind of accommodations and childcare and something that you support, your maybe able to get a very dedicated, good worker. If you are able to really cater to them. Mary Kay is a company that really focused on middle-aged women and went after hiring them and created a reward and incentive system for them, and it became very successful. Minorities, of course, it's important to give minorities opportunities. It's adds creativity, adds really just your potential as a workplace. So it's very, very important. And then, of course, disabled. Just because somebody is disabled in one way doesn't mean that they're not super abled in some other way. So even the word disabled rubs me the wrong way, because sometimes disabled people are really, really able, really good at something. They just maybe are in a wheelchair. So don't look down on somebody because they're in a wheelchair, because they still have a brain and they're still able to do many jobs really, really well, and maybe even better than somebody else because they overcompensate for their disability. We talked about this earlier. Application form is there for pre-screening, collecting candidate data, employment history, but there's also small print out there and say, by filling up this information, you are allowing us to do a background search. And often you're asking those mandatory, are you a veteran? What's your race? What's your gender? All of those kinds of things. Now, there are some things that you can ask and some things that you cannot ask. You can ask about education. You kind of can ask about arrest record. You can ask if you ever been arrested, but you can't ask somebody to supply their criminal record. You can, ask, notify in case of emergency only when you have hired somebody, not in a job application necessarily. Memberships in organizations, well, yeah, you can ask if you are members of professional organizations, but you cannot ask them about political or religious organizations like that. Physical handicaps, you can't be, digging in and try to ask somebody about handicaps. You can ask them, are you capable of performing the duties of this job? If the answer is yes, that's all you need to know. But you can't ask and say, what kind of handicaps? Tell me about your disabilities, kind of a thing. Marital status, no, you can't ask a marital status. It doesn't matter. Housing, you cannot ask a person where they live, how they live, or whatever. Person could be a homeless living out of their car, but they can still do the job, and you cannot judge them because of the fact that they don't have living circumstances. Video resumes are something that you gotta be very, very careful with. A lot of companies use them, but these days there are ethical concerns. Anybody can Photoshop them. Anybody can use artificial intelligence to create a video that looks and talks just like you, but isn't you. And so you also have to know confidentiality. But hey, we are end of time over here. So the last slide is just talking about mandatory arbitration and biodata. And by the way, biodata, searching for somebody's background is the best predictor of somebody.